Shalom from Jerusalem. This is TV7's Israel at War update. And as we're set to deliberate the latest developments, particularly, of course, last night's belligerent attack by the Islamic Republic of Iran against Israel, it's always important to remember how this war began. 362 days ago, on October 7th of last year, the Islamist Hamas and its terror affiliates in the Gaza Strip launched an onslaught on southern Israel, declaring war by perpetrating a massacre, murdering some 1,200 mostly civilians, wounding over 4,800 others, and kidnapping 246 people, including elderly, men, women, infants, and children. 101 of them remain in Hamas captivity to date. The subsequent day, on October 8th, Iran essentially joined this war by greenlighting initially its Lebanese proxy, Hezbollah, to launch cross-border attacks against Israel. Since then, this proxy, Hezbollah namely, has launched over 9,300 projectiles toward Israeli territory, and not Hezbollah alone. Additional proxies throughout the region, including from Yemen, Ansar Allah on October the 17th, as well as the Hashd al-Shaabi from Iraq and additional Shiite militias in Syria, have all joined this blatant attacks against Israel, including Iran, which has initially launched a direct attack on the night between the 13th and 14th of April, and last night has yet again launched a direct strike against Israel. To update us on the latest, let's now turn to Central Israel, where we're joined by TV7's editor-at-large, Mr. Amir Oren. Amir, what can you tell us about that?
So, there is a euphoric sense in Israel because the Iranian attack has failed completely, or so it seems. But we shouldn't look at it this way. Yes, the Israeli air defense and missile fighters, both female and male, have acted in a wonderful fashion, as did their American colleagues and others. But nevertheless, there were some near misses. And, if we take it to a basketball analogy, probably none of the balls have entered the basket, but some of them have struck the rim of the basket, and they could have gone in if they aimed more properly, or perhaps something else has happened. So while Israel was rightly overjoyed over the fact that almost 200 missiles caused no casualty within Israel proper. One Palestinian was killed in Jericho. Nevertheless, it was a close run thing, and Israel cannot let it pass by. Obviously, there will be some retaliation. Prime Minister Netanyahu, when he had a statement about it, indicated that what happened to the Hamas leadership and the Hezbollah leadership could very well happen in Tehran. He did not name names, did not name Supreme Leader Khamenei or the IRGC aerospace commander Amir Ali Hajidazeh, but these are the obvious targets. Now, as the air raid sirens or missile raid sirens went off, exactly at the same time, there was a horrific terror attack in Jaffa with 7 civilians killed, 1 from Georgia. 4 of the other 6 have been identified, all young Israeli women. And in Lebanon, the Israeli operation goes on. Earlier today, the IDF spokesperson has released the name of a first casualty. Unfortunately, it will not be the last.
Indeed. Well, just to specify, Georgia, the state in the United States, or Georgia, the country in Europe?
No, Georgia in Asia, bordering Russia.
In Eurasia. as we call it. Let's now turn to the commander of the Israeli Air Force Task Force for Air and Missile Defense, namely Brigadier General in Reserve Doron Gavish. General, as a believer, of course, I'll say praise God initially and then praise you and your colleagues for, secondly, for doing an outstanding job. I think that the most robust voiced praise was last night for the air and missile defense of the Israeli Air Force for really an outstanding job once again in the face of Iran, with senior officials around the globe saying the Iranians have yet again failed.
Well, thank you, Jonathan. Indeed, first, to going back to your comment, I always say to my friends and brothers for CENTCOM that this is a combination of skills, training, technology, and the fact that we are in the Holy Land. So this is for sure something which is very helpful for all of us. And indeed, you're right. Close to 200 projectiles that were shot toward Israel. Once again, we are breaking, unfortunately, historical records on the threats that are being shot toward Israel. And the bottom line is that none of the Israelis were injured or killed out of those projectiles. We did see the pictures. We always talk about the debris. And this time, because it was night, we saw the debris which are coming down to Earth. We see them basically like, we see them burning, coming into Israel. And this is again and again the reason why we said that the defense of the people and their survival would be if we would do the main two things. From one side, actively intercepting those targets, and then from the other side, behaving as it is expected and following the issues that are being, following the orders that are being issued by the Israeli Home Front Command, meaning going to your shelter. This combination allows us to minimize the threat and to minimize the damage over Israel. So overall, it is a success. Overall, we could say that the Iranians failed again. But I think that, looking at it from a strategic point of view, I think that all our friends on this panel, I hear it, again and again. Also, we are all sharing the same thoughts. Miri, Yaron, myself, we always talk about the head of the snake. We always talk about Iran. And I think that now there are no question marks. This is not anymore a war against Iran's proxies, Hezbollah or Yemen's or other. This is a decision. This is the second time that Iran is attacking directly Israel. I don't think that we could look at it other than they are basically declaring a war against Israel. I don't think that we would be allowing ourselves to stay only on the defense. I don't think that we should be the only one that would deal with this Iranian threat. This is much bigger than the Israeli story. This is the story of the West. This is the story of CENTCOM and the forces that are around. This is the story about the prospects that we have in the countries around us with Jordan, Egypt, Saudi, the Gulf states against the evil Iran, what we see from Syria, Hezbollah, and from coming from this side. So I think this is the big story, and this is where we're going to. Of course, we still have a lot of challenges, but yesterday, I think it is another turning point in this war.
Absolutely. Something that spoke volumes. Not only to the entire region, but to the entire world. And I think it's also very interesting to note that while the order was given by the commander of the Islamic Revolutionary Guards, Hussein Salami, and who received the order basically of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, according to a number of reports, the so-called president of Iran, Masoud Pezeshkian, was not informed before the attack or the decision was taken to launch the attack. So it just shows who really rules that country, and this government that plays its role as a propaganda machine to try and allow the West to swallow them as if they're some sort of democracy is just one big farce that needs to be replaced. It needs to be changed. And I think that the people of Iran deserve a better future. These people are very sophisticated, very good people, and they are not our enemies. They were amongst our first friends when the State of Israel was established, and that is something that every Israeli knows. But let's now turn to Central Israel, where we're joined by Colonel in Reserve, Miri Eisen, a senior fellow at the Institute for Counterterrorism, formerly a senior officer at the IDF's intelligence directorate, and a advisor at the Prime Minister's office. It's good to see you, Miri. Several hours before Israel launched its ground maneuver into Lebanon, the Iranians signaled Israel, threatened Israel that there will be consequences to such an action, and that they would launch a deliberate attack against Israel. Israel, of course, does not heed any threats and responded by informing Arab states that carried those messages to Iran that Israel would respond very vigorously to any strike from Iran. Now, it seems like the ballistic missiles that were launched, 181 of them, was not the only action that the Iranians took. They also instructed terror operatives to infiltrate Israel and conduct a heinous attack, a terror attack that claimed the lives against, as Mr. Owen also mentioned, of 7 civilians, one of whom was brutally murdered while her baby was still on her. What is the Israeli response to something so belligerent?
Israel has been fighting for 362 days on, what can we count them? 5 fronts, 6 fronts, 7 fronts. Every time we do that, people just don't understand what we're talking about. And I state that because yesterday we were fighting on all of the fronts as well, and that domestic one. In the last 362 days, there have been additional domestic meaning just inside Israel, terror attacks in different locations inside Israel. And yesterday was a horrific one, and it coincided exactly with that Islamic regime's missile attack. When I look into the new year, and today is the eve of the new Jewish year, I look into it and say, we will continue to fight on all of those fronts. And I know that isn't necessarily a message which makes people happy, but I think it's a message both of resilience and hope, that we're standing strong. That yesterday there was a horrible attack in Tel Aviv Jaffa on the light rail. People just going along their way, they literally went onto the light rail and opened fire on it and next to it. And you know what? An hour or 2 or 3 later, Israelis are back on the light rail. That's our strength. So when you ask about the stronger and broader retaliation, we are fighting against Hezbollah actively in Lebanon. Hezbollah are a trained terror military. When I was talking before, as I say, I call them terror militants because the whole world likes to call them militants, and they are terror militants, and they are trained and active, and they fought on Bashar Assad's side in Syria and other places. We are fighting against both, if it's the Houthis in Yemen and all of those other forces, and we're going to continue to do so. So in that sense, I look around and say, what specifically now? We will respond against Iran this way or another. But it isn't just about the Islamic regime of Iran. It's all of what they have sent out in this last year. And at the end, what it's hit is Israeli resilience. And again, I'm not going to thank Doron personally, but it's in that sense thanking the investment that the state of Israel made, not by itself, but that it made in defending the population that lives here in Israel. And I think that that's our strength, and that's what I look forward to as our response. It's not just about the military response now against Iran.
Absolutely. I think beyond the fact that you mentioned that Hezbollah fought alongside the Assad regime and additional Iranian proxies in Syria and butchered the Syrian people, millions of them fleeing. It was the largest displacement since World War II. To that point in time, of course, since then, the larger displacement is in Ukraine, but we'll put that aside for now. The fact of the matter is that Hezbollah is in every cartel, in every malicious regime, in every terror organization, actively, the Ansar Allah in Yemen, the Houthis, the top advisor for launching missiles against vessels to disrupt maritime shipping, a member of Hezbollah. And the drug industry, the drugs that being sent to the Gulf countries, to Europe, South America, Hezbollah is very powerful in South America. That's the reason those South American leaders and Central American leaders are coming out in support of Iran and Hezbollah because of those ties. So that is something that we need to keep in mind. But with that being said, let's now turn to our next panelist, Brigadier General in Reserve Yaron Rosen, the former IDF Chief of Cyber Staff, an Air Force commander, and a fighter pilot. It's always a pleasure to have you on, Yaron. I'd like to immediately ask you specifically, Israel has launched a ground offensive into Lebanon. The 98th Division, of course, is taking the forefront in this activity, alongside with now the announcement of yet another division to join in, the 36th Division. There's going to be a lot of pressure on Hezbollah. Is it prudent to keep focused on Hezbollah first and deal with Iran at a time and place that they will not expect, somewhat down the road, potentially, of course, before the U.S. elections on November 5th?
As Miri mentioned, I think, we're seeing Israel fighting on many fronts, and the invasion into Lebanon is part of taking care of Hezbollah after the command and control blow that Israel gave Hezbollah, like a real blow at all the way to the top. We spoke in the last few meetings we had about Hezbollah being the insurance policy for Iran, and now it's not eliminated, but it is badly, severely wounded, let's call it, but it's still operationally alive. Cutting the command and control of Hezbollah, as bad as it is, and the decades and even centuries of knowledge that all these commanders had in running this terror military, is something that will take years, if not decades, to restore. The investment that Iranians made, a lot of it has gone down the drain. But having said that, it is important to understand that Hezbollah's fighting force, the regional commanders, just as because they are such a big terror military, the fighting force is still alive and kicking. And I think that the ground invasion from the IDF side to better position the IDF to start protecting the border settlements, the Israeli settlements on the border from Metula all the way westward to Rosh Hanikra. This is something necessary, but will come with cost. And this is where we start getting really, really into the tension of fighting many fronts. So I agree completely that Israel needs to finish the job and turn eastward towards Iran. But now we have to play safe. What we've seen after we have to be bold but safe. Being safe means that we have to get the United States support, not only with munitions and things like that, which are basically the red line that without it we cannot even fight, but we actually need regional operational support and diplomatic support that will allow Israel to attack eastward. We've seen right after the attack, interestingly, that the Iranians were speaking the language of Nasrallah. They were saying, okay, you did this, we retaliated. If you don't do anything, the equation is good for us. So they're trying to speak Nasrallah's language because he's not here anymore to speak that language. And I think this is exactly where the tide turns. I think if Israel goes back to the tit for tat, to these equations that do not do anything good for Israel in the long term, this is where we have to take a deep breath, play safe, play bold, and start looking eastward and defense. As much as I love Doron, and I do love Doron, and I thank him and everyone in the Israel's air defense forces. I mean, active air defense was just, it's just a miracle. If you look at it, there's no other way to look at it. And maybe it is the Holy Land effect. But I think it's mainly a lot of sweat, and a lot of good people that did this for decades and decades of investment with our friends, the United States. And after saying that about defense, it is time to move to the offense and to building and structuring our deterrence and our posture in the region widely with our allies in the Middle East.
Indeed. A couple of brief points, since we don't have very much time left, and I still want each of you to give us some insight since we are heading into this Rosh Hashanah, the head of the year in Hebrew. Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, the supreme leader of the Islamic Republic, came out and highlighted that the main culprits for regional instability, it's not Israel, it's the United States and a number of European nations. Why? Because he knows that Israel is part of the Western Bloc, while he is part of the Axis, together with the Russians, the Chinese, the North Koreans, the Maduro regime, and other regimes, unfortunately, even South Africa, which is very adamant on being part of this bloc. But nonetheless, we are seeing that Israel has unveiled the tip of its iceberg, namely the various activities in the last couple of weeks in Lebanon have put it in disarray that will be studied for centuries, if not decades, since this really put a new type or new dimension of warfare, like the Dutch were the ones who introduced modern warfare in the naval sphere. Israel has now done so in the land sphere and aerial sphere. But Mr. Oren, General Gavish, Colonel Eisen, and General Rosen, 2 sentences each. What are we to focus on for this upcoming year? General Rosen, of course, mentioned offense. Are we going into a stage of really asserting dominance in this region? Mr. Owen, we'll start with you.
So we haven't spoken about the hostages in Gaza, and their fate is intertwined with a ceasefire deal, which has been brokered, but as of late, nothing was heard from Yahya Sinwar. He may all of a sudden reappear and agree to this deal, in which case there will be a deal. And then the question will be whether the Israeli Western moderate Arab coalition can produce any arrangement to govern Gaza and start to rehabilitate it, so that it will have a lot to lose if it goes back to its belligerent ways. In the north, obviously, the residents will not go back until they feel safe and secure, which will mean that the Radwan forces, one way or the other, will be pushed north of the Litani River.
Thank you, Mr. Owen. General Gavish, shorter than Mr. Owen, please.
Well, Jonathan, for the next year, first we have to keep and being humble. We have to remember that there are a lot of challenges in front of us, and we have to keep and being focused on the goals of this war, and this is bringing the hostages back. We're not done with the Hamas yet. and bringing the civilians of Israel in the northern and in the south part of Israel back to their houses and securely so.
Colonel Eisen?
In non-military terms, I want Israel to work on multi-fronts, not just the ones that we mentioned, but that we will talk the talk of the Middle East in the way that the Middle Easterns understand, and yet we will continue to be, as you said, Jonathan, part of that Western coalition against the enemies and the axes. And that is a very challenging challenge for all of us, because we need to both be strong here within our Middle East and yet understand that we need and want to be part of our Western allies.
General Rosen?
From defense to offense, Hezbollah Lebanon back to the Lebanese, Iran maybe back to the Iranians, and Israel strong in the region with its allies. I think that's where we have to strive for. And I'm afraid that right now, Iran, the struggle with Iran is and will overshadow in the next few months, sadly, every other front, and that is what we need to do.
Indeed. The Iranians are good people. The regime there is terrible, and they will face the brunt for their belligerent actions. But this is all the time that we have for today. I'd like to immediately thank and wish also all of our panelists, Shana Tova, including, of course, General Rosen, Colonel Eisen, General Gavish, and Mr. Oren. I'd like to thank all of you at home as well, and to wish you also Shana Tova, ve'erev tov, ve'shaket betikva, until our next update from here in Jerusalem. Shalom.
My name is Doron Gavish, and my background, 30 years of serving in the Israeli Air Force. My last job, I was the commander of the Israeli Air and Missile Defense during the introduction of the Iron Dome to the defense of Israel. All of this allows me really to be part of the team here in TV7. It is super important to have such a platform. We talk about the global situation, we talk about Israel, and those different angles which are relevant to the discussion.
For more of TV7's productions and editorials, we invite you to visit our website at TV7israelnews.com.